The Wizard of Oz was first created in the 1900s and was meant to be a colorful children's tale. But soon enough, people started to suspect that some populist ideals were hidden in the Wizard of Oz's text. The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, written by L. Frank Baum, can be seen as an allegory to the populist movement and money, as Baum had a significant political background and was known to include political references in his other works. The Wonderful Wizard of Oz also includes many hidden gold and silver references, and many of the characters represent the different social classes of the era. The Wizard of Oz was first suspected to be related to the populist movement when an obscure high school teacher published an article in the American Quarterly claiming that Baum's tale concealed a clever allegory to the populist movement. Throughout this project, we will look at all the different reasons why one would suspect this. Besides writing popular children's books, L. Frank Baum was a reporter. Baum frequently reported on politics and was known to support the populist movement in his writings, often giving them money and writing supportive articles about them. Baum also included many other political references in his other pieces of writing. In the second, lesser-known Oz tale, Baum wrote many scenes which addressed the issues of feminism and the suffragette movement. Also, in the article The Royal Historian of Oz, Baum all but admitted that his writings contained a veiled subtext, confessing his desire to write stories that would bear the stamp of our times and depict the progressive fairies of the day. In the Journal of Political Economy, in an article entitled The Wizard of Oz as a Monetary Allegory, writer Hugh Rockoff examined the analogies between Baum's use of imagery and the monetary politics of the populist era. In the book version of Oz, Dorothy walks the yellow brick road in silver shoes, not in the ruby slippers. Silver shoes on a golden road. A key part of the populist party was a demand for free silver, or the free and unlimited coinage of silver and gold, at a fixed ratio of 16:1. Dorothy's silver shoes walking on a golden road is not the only coincidence in Oz. In the book, Baum states that this children's book was written solely to pleasure children of today. The most popular belief is that this odd disclaimer may have been a hint that Baum intended to conceal a message in the text. Indeed, to do this would be fully consistent with all of Baum's later writings, as all of these writings had some hidden message. When Dorothy's house comes to rest in Oz, it lands right on the Wicked Witch of the East, killing her instantly. When Dorothy comes out of her house, she finds herself in a strange land, looking down on these small people called Munchkins. The Munchkins are rejoicing at the death of the witch who had enslaved them. The witch represents Eastern financial industrial interests and their gold standard political allies, the main targets of populist venom. Farmers often blame their problems on the practices of Wall Street bankers and the captains of industry, who they believe were in a conspiracy to enslave the little people, just as the Witch of the East had enslaved the Munchkins. The land of Oz, with its varying landscape and its diverse inhabitants, is meant to represent America during the populist movement. The Emerald City, its center and seat of government, represents Washington, D.C. And in an effort to be made whole, Dorothy and her friends travel to the capital to see the wizard, who presumably has the power to grant them all of their wishes. This journey corresponds to the populist effort to acquire power in Washington, and the travelers recall the industrial armies who marched on the capital during the Depression of 1893 through 97. The most famous of these armies, Coxey's Army, was led by a successful businessman who urged the government to fund public works programs to alleviate unemployment. Coxey, who helped to meet with President Cleveland, was arrested for trespassing, and his proposals were ignored. Dorothy and her friends also face hazards on their road to Emerald City and are turned away by the wizard, who shows little sympathy for their problems. Dorothy, the main character in the novel, is meant to represent an individualized ideal of the American people. Dorothy lives in Kansas, where virtually everything, the treeless prairie, the sun-beaten grass, the paint-stripped house, even her Auntie Em and Uncle Henry, is all dull, lifeless, and gray. This depiction represents the condition of Kansas in the late 1880s and the early 1890s, when a combination of scorching droughts, severe winters, and an invasion of grasshoppers reduced the prairie to an uninhabitable wasteland. The result for farmers and all who depended on agriculture for their livelihood was devastating. As populism spread rapidly throughout the Midwest and into the South, Kansas was the site of the most popular and radical elements. In 1890, populist candidates began winning seats in state legislatures and Congress. And in 2 years later, populist candidates gained control of the lower house of the state assembly. They elected a populist governor and sent a populist to the U.S. Senate. The twister that carries Dorothy to Oz symbolizes the populist cyclone that swept across Kansas in the early 1890s. Throughout her adventures, Dorothy meets many characters. The first character she encounters is the Scarecrow, who does not know anything because he has no brains at all. The brainless Scarecrow represents Midwestern farmers, who after years of hard work were still looked down upon and ridiculed by the government. The second character Dorothy meets on her adventures is the Tin Man. The Tin Man represents the nation's workers, in particular the industrial workers, that the populists hope to make common cause. The Tin Man's rusted condition represents the condition of labor during the Depression of the 1890s. Like many workers of that time, the Tin Man is unemployed. Yet, with a few drops of his trusty oil can, he's able to start working. A remedy just like the pump priming measures the populists advocated. The third character Dorothy meets is the Lion. Dorothy and her gang first meet the Lion when they are moving through the forest and the Lion attempts to hurt them. The Lion is none other than William Jennings Bryan, the Nebraska representative in Congress and later the Democratic presidential candidate in 1896 and 1900. Bryan, which rhymes with lion and also sounds like lying, was known for his roaring rhetoric and was occasionally portrayed in the press as a lion, as he was the Populist Party itself. Bryan adopted the Free Silver mantra and won the populist support in his first race against McKinley. Like the Lion of Oz, Bryan was the last to join the party. His defeat in the general election was largely owing to his failure to win the support of Eastern workers, just as the lion's claws could make no impression on the Tin Man. The final important character that Dorothy meets on her journey is the Wizard. The Wizard, who can take on any form he wishes, represents the protean politicians of the era, especially the presidents of the Gilded Age. Given the even division of Democrats and Republicans, and the razor-thin majorities of most presidential elections, candidates rarely took clear stands on the issues. As a result, voters often had difficulty in determining what candidate stood for. The Wizard fits this description, for who the real Oz is, Dorothy is informed, no living person can tell. Indeed, when Dorothy's gang enters the throne room, the Wizard appears to each of them in a different form. Like many politicians, the Wizard is unwilling to help unless they grant him favors without some return. Politicians are also infamous for failing to keep promises, and the Great Oz is no different. When Dorothy returns after killing the Witch of the West, the Wizard keeps them waiting and then puts them off. The Wizard of Oz is full of strange coincidences that link back to the populist movement. From silver shoes on a golden road to a wizard that can't keep his promises, it's up to you to decide if the Wizard of Oz really was meant to be a populist allegory.